I know we're running out of time, but I was also asked to talk about Nigeria. Before I do that and then close our panel, I'd like to say that last week, the International Organization of Securities Commissions, which is the worldwide body of regulators, met in Luxembourg, and I sit on the board. And what fascinated me is that some of the issues that the distinguished panel have talked about and you have raised were some of the issues that we talked about in Luxembourg. From my perspective, capital markets are key for raising medium to long-term financing. And I remember being on a panel on growth and emerging markets and talked about the huge infrastructure requirements, talked about the need for companies to come to markets. And at the end of that panel, a number of the people from Europe basically said, but we're facing exactly the same issues. So fundamentally, market-based financing is competing very vigorously with banking finance. And I think with the requirements that have been placed on banks around the world, there's a lot more emphasis today on market-based finance. However, I think what the markets and public markets provide is really beyond finance, is greater transparency and accountability and visibility, particularly on emerging markets like the panel that you've heard from. But for me, most important is broadening economic access. Some of the social and political issues that we're dealing with around the world, a lot of it is very much driven by the fact that a number of people in countries don't feel that they're able to share in the wealth of those countries. And I believe capital markets and equity markets and exchanges help in that regard. And so raising money, governance issues, and broadening economic access, for me, are the three issues, whichever market that you look at. Nigeria. We have, usually I sit in a room with the New York Stock Exchange and where people are saying, well, our market cap is $16 trillion, and I'm feeling very, very small. Today I'm feeling very large for Nigeria. Because, the market cap for Nigeria, if you put equities and bonds together, is $112 billion. As of yesterday, our equity markets were totaled about $72 billion. It's a market that has huge potential. We feel very strongly about still being on the path to joining the $1 trillion club in a very short time, because a number of companies that we believe should be listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange are not yet listed. Some of the most successful companies in Nigeria today are telecom companies, and they're not yet listed. We have a program both to encourage them and to persuade them to list. We believe in the not-so-distant future, the MTNs, Glos, Etisalat will list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Our president has been himself leading a transformation of the power sector. And one aspect of that transformation is really moving the power sector to private hands. And about a month ago, about 3 weeks ago, the power generation and distribution companies, 17 of them, were transferred to very capable private sector hands. And one of the agreements that we've been working on with them is that in the not-so-distant future, those power companies will list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. We have an agriculture revolution going on in Nigeria. We have some of the best performing companies on the Nigerian Stock Exchange being agro-based businesses. So what we're seeing is a number of new ones that are being created, some that are doing well but not listed, who we expect will also list in the not-so-distant future. So we think that over the next 2 or 3 years, over the next 3 to 5 years, by 2016, we will have a market that is a $1 trillion market, equities, bonds, ETFs, and others. The exchange has done great work in transforming itself. The comment that was made about a common passport harmonization of rules across West Africa is something that we're very much a part of. Indeed, by the end of this month or early next month, we'll be launching a new trading platform, which we believe will be the gateway into Africa. We already have a very good trading platform. I think the region recognizes the size of Nigeria, and we're looking at a partnership that works both for other markets as well as for Nigeria. But that trading platform, which is being provided by NASDAQ, will certainly move us to another league, and we hope that we can support the other exchanges in the region through the implementation of that particular platform. But also fascinating for us as a regulator is that we, this year, have already launched an unlisted market called the NASD market for unlisted securities, because we do have a number of securities that are sponsored by public companies, but that are unlisted. And for us as a regulator, as a regulatory haven, because essentially the broker-dealers came together and said that there's this group of companies who can come under the regulatory purview of the SEC. We similarly have an over-the-counter bond market that was transferred to, that is also one that will be launched on the 7th of November. Like the other colleagues on the panel, we have revamped our alternative securities market. I think everyone recognizes that small and medium-scale enterprises are really the engine of creating jobs and resolving some of the challenges that we face, social challenges. And so there is a revamp of the alternative securities market. I do want to say also, I know that we're running a few minutes behind schedule, to say that one of the things that has inspired our markets is the reform of our pension sector. Over the recent past, our pension sector has been growing by about 30%. Today we have about $22 billion under management, and they represent a key domestic institutional investor base, and their attitudes and interest in the market, in a sense, also attracts the participation of foreign investors. We have about, today, 50% of the daily value of the trading on our stock market actually comes from foreign investors, and 50% comes from domestic investors. On liquidity, I just want to say that since we started market making in September last year, liquidity on the Nigerian stock market has grown significantly. And so for others who are looking at ways to enhance liquidity, I think having a very strong market making environment is critical. But partnering that with introducing instruments like securities lending, like short selling, also supports these market makers in the work that they do. And finally, on your comment about private equity venture capital, in Nigeria, we believe this is absolutely essential, that you need an ecosystem that prepares companies to come on the stock market. And if you prepare them well through the participation of VC and PE firms, then when they get on the stock market, they can meet your requirements and you don't need to delist them. But Africa is doing really, really well. I think three or four or five, if you include North Africa, of the top performing markets today are actually in Africa, and they've been consistent. They performed well in 2012, they've performed well year to date, and my view is that they'll continue to perform well. And part of it is what most African countries started 20 years ago, which is to ensure that there's macroeconomic stability. And I think that's the key. And part of what we need to see is people participate, join the African countries in participating in this success. I will, on a final note, I'll just say that what the stock markets provide and the capital markets provide for investors in general, it's a way to participate in the success that we're seeing in Africa. Public markets, people are challenging public markets, crowdfunding around the world. But in Africa, for people who are not as familiar with some of the investment opportunities, it's a way to start looking at the great opportunities that Africa has to offer. Thank you.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.